Hey guys, welcome to my first tutorial video. In today's video, I will be covering how to draw a simple traditional rose. As some of you might know who are tattooers or have been doing a lot of flash, you'll notice that my simple roses resemble Sailor Jerry. I think he's probably one of the greatest tattooers to reference when you're getting into drawing traditional, as far as just learning the fundamentals, the basics of how things are laid out, where the black needs to go, and things like that. So I figured instead of drawing an intricate rose, it'd probably be smart just to start with something a little more simplistic. That way you guys can kind of get a feel for where the petals go, where the leaves go, and things like that. And I'll even show you guys some options of how you guys can switch it up to make it your own. So I have here 11 by 14 sketch paper, and right now I'm using a Tuscan red Prismacolor pencil. You do not have to use this color. You can actually use a number 2 pencil if you want. The reason I like to use a colored pencil is because I like to draw the rough sketch very lightly, and the reason I do this is because I like to come back later and kind of build it up. So if you do your hard initial final outline right away, well, then that makes it a little bit harder to go back and fix it. So by using, say, a blue, red, any lighter color when you're sketching, it kind of makes it easier to go back in and do some more defined lines and make changes as needed, because you're probably gonna have small errors or things that are not proportional and things like that, which I'll show you as we're going through the video. So once you have your paper in front of you and your pencil, we'll go ahead and get started. So what I like to do first off is everything is drawing with shapes. So if I'm drawing a rose that needs to be straight up and down, I'll usually start with a little line. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw a line, just a straight line. Doesn't have to be perfectly straight, but you do wanna get it as straight as you can, just as this is kind of the guideline of the direction your rose is gonna go. And it can be big or small. I'm doing mine kind of big just because I tend to draw things bigger. So yeah, and as you notice, I'm very lightly sketching, and the reason I do this is because this line doesn't matter later on in the drawing. You really just need it as your guideline to start with. And if you look in a lot of old drawing books, they show you how to draw with shapes and lines and things like that, and that's really important because that's what keeps all of the figures together and make sure everything's proportionate. So I definitely recommend having some lines or shapes, and look, it can be ugly. What matters is just getting it right. So if you have a million lines or it's looking messy, don't be afraid to get messy, don't be afraid to get loose. The more loose you get, I think it makes your drawing look that much better. So once you've kind of sketched out this line going right down the middle, what I like to start with is what's called the bulb of the rose. So what I do is I will just lightly sketch a circle just like this. Again, your circle doesn't have to be exactly perfect, and I don't recommend using a circle template because you just need a general idea of what the shape of the bulb is going to be as kind of like a reference or a guideline. So go ahead and lightly get it, and then you're using this center line as kind of the middle dividing section of your rose. That way you can keep all the proportions correct and have kind of a guideline. Make sure that your rose isn't getting lopsided. So go ahead and lightly draw the circle. Now, once you have this circle drawn, this is going to be the bulb of the flower, like the blooming part. So what I like to do second is I draw another little circle right here. It's almost like an oval, to be honest with you. So I draw an oval. You don't really want it touching here. The reason being is because you want to leave a little space for this top petal to be right here. So go ahead and draw, I would say, yeah, it's a little bit more of an oval than a circle. Go ahead and draw that. And again, make sure that this is kind of the center line of your oval. So hopefully I'm not going too fast for you guys, but after that, what you're gonna do is you're gonna come down like this. You're gonna draw kind of like the bulb shape. If you look at a rose when it's very first blooming and it's just a rose bud, this is kind of what it looks like. It starts off as a little tiny bud, and then as the petals start to peel off, it opens up more and more. But since we're doing a simple traditional one, we're not going to get too fancy with any of that. So once you're done with that oval up here, this is the next shape you're going to do. So just like that. Now, I know this probably looks weird or boring or simple, but the nice thing is I like to teach just the basic fundamentals, and then you can kind of go from there. So instead of starting off drawing a super tricked out rose, I think it's better to start with something really simple and then kind of build off there. So in later videos, I'll show some different ways to draw some more complex roses, but for now, I figured it's best to start with something simple and then kind of go from there. So now that you have this shape, what we're gonna do is we're gonna draw the 2 folding side petals. So what I do, it's almost like a snake or an S shape. So start from either side. You can start from the right or the left, but have it kind of come like this. Again, make sure you're drawing lightly because we're gonna go back later and harden these lines. But you just want to be able to have some more room to work with to add little details or make changes in case if things are disproportionate or things like that. So once you have this, you're going to kind of mimic it on the other side, but you're going to stop halfway because this petal is underneath. So this would be the overlapping petal and this one would be right behind it. So, and if you look, this almost kind of has like a heart type shape like that. And then again, this middle line is kind of like the meeting point for those two. Just like that. So hopefully I'm not going too fast for you guys, but so from there, what we're gonna do is I like to make this almost like it's folded over a little bit. And again, these are all referenced from Sailor Jerry. So you'll see a lot of my roses in Sailor Jerry stuff. Or actually I should say the other way around. So here we go. So what I like to do is start to do this S curve, and then I like to add a couple little bumps. This kind of gives it a little bit more, texture and curve to it. I have seen people that just do a hard line. It does look a little too plain for me, but again, you can always add or take away whatever you see fit. I'm just going to show you guys the way I draw it for now. So once you have that, you're going to kind of mimic the same thing on this side. And so you start with that S shape, and then when you get about right here, do another bump. Now the reason there's only 2 bumps right here instead of 3 is this goes behind, so you wouldn't see that. So that's the start. So right now you have the center bulb, this is an outer petal, and then another petal. So then what I do right here is go in this circle, kind of start going around, and then bring a little loop around. And what this is this is the center of the bulb or another petal that's being folded on the inside. So go ahead and do this. Almost looks like a C if you look at it like that. Just do kind of start with this circle, this half circle, and then pull it into a C, just like that. Again, you're gonna stay drawing very lightly through this entire time because you don't want to start doing your hard lines till the end of the video. Once you start making your final outlines. So then from there, I draw a little line coming down from here, and that's the ending of this petal, kind of folding over. And then from here to here, I draw a line, and I kind of make it parallel with this line right here. So you'll lightly sketch like that. So now you have the inner folding petal. And that's how you're kind of starting to build up your layers just like a real rose would have. But again, we're doing traditional rose, so it doesn't have to be as lifelike like an actual rose. So from there, I'm going to do this bottom big fold. Usually on traditional roses, or at least the Sailor Jerry type, is this one is usually the biggest one. So what I do is make this my center meeting point. So go about right there, about halfway through this side bulb. You're going to go right here, kind of round it out, and then bring it down to a point like that. Almost as if you're drawing a heart, but it doesn't come all the way down. So like that. And then what you're going to do on the other side is kind of match it up. And if you need to, the beautiful thing about using lines or shapes is, say you want this to be exact, what you could do is literally draw a little line. So I really encourage people that when you're drawing, use lines, shapes, anything you can to keep things that need to line up, because this is really, you're building the structure right here. So pull that line across and then go like this and kind of mimic the shape you did on this left side right here. Now, if this line right here is confusing, you do not have to do it. It's just something that I throw out there for people who want to try different ways. And with drawing, you really got to find what works best for you. There's not a one way for everything, but I think it's very important to have a formula when you're drawing anything, whether it be a tiger head, a rose, a dragon, anything. There's formulas and shapes that you really got to start with when you're getting the fundamentals laid out. So now that we have this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another side petal. This one's going to be smaller than this one, about half the size. Do that, bring it to a point, and then you're going to come right here and bring it to a point again. So just like that. And this is going to have, let me see, about 6 petals when we're all done. And you'll see later on in the video, the amount of petals right now is not important, but just so you kind of know where we're going. So once you have this petal dialed in, then loosely and lightly draw it again on the other side. And what I do when I'm drawing is I'll draw one side lightly, step back and look at it. Kind of, sometimes you got to step back and really take a look at it and see, is that the same size? Does it match? And certain things you don't want to match perfectly because then it looks too stiff. But in this situation, for just a clean, simple rose, I like to match it pretty close. So now you have the bottom big petal, and then you have these two side petals. And then what I do is, this is kind of my marker, right where this petal meets the bulb. You can do a little line if you want, a little line right here. You don't need these lines, but this is kind of just a guideline to let you know where these next petals are gonna go. So what I do is I start with this one, and then what I like to do is just add a simple little dip in it. So as you can see, the petals are getting smaller. This is the big one, a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller. So once you've lightly sketched this one, then go ahead and come to the right side and then kind of mimic it. Now, as you can see, you're using this circle that we originally drew as kind of your guideline of how far out to go, because you don't want to draw a big old fat petal like this and then that makes your rose lopsided. So that's where the benefit of using those shapes and lines comes into place. So now you have these petals going on. The only one you're missing is the top one, which is above the bulb. So what you're going to do is you're going to kind of mimic this one. So notice how these three come to a point and then this one comes rounded. I only do that to break up the look of it. A lot of times in tattooing, when you're doing stuff that's repetitive, it's kind of nice to break up the shapes. That way it doesn't look too boring or too plain. So what I'll do is I'll start from this side, go and bring it up to a point, just like that. Again, don't focus so much on making it perfect right out of the gate. What you really want to do is just make sure you're getting the proportions and the sizing right, which is where it's important to, be drawing lightly, because you can go back in and, there's times where I'll make a line that's too big or not proportionate, and it's easy to go back and, erase it if you have to. Even though we're drawing light, it's totally okay to erase and go back. So now we have the basic bulb of the rose, and we're going to start with the stem going down this way. Now there's multiple ways you can do the stem. As you can see, we have a perfect straight line. You can totally do that. What I'm going to do in this one is I'm going to give it just a slight S shape. The reason I like to do that is because I find that if I'm tattooing this, if this tattoo needed to line up perfectly with, say, like the arm bone right here or somewhere where like it needed to be perfect, then I would leave this perfectly straight stem. But if, say, I'm tattooing it on a part of the arm where it needs to curve a little bit, I would do the S shape. So I'll show you guys how to do the S shape, and leave it up to you if you want to do the straight one or like how I'm doing it, but I recommend doing it the way I'm doing it just so you can kind of see. So what I do is I'll start right here and just draw almost like a little, not quite an S, but just like a little curve on both sides, just like that. Again, drawing really lightly so I can go back and make changes. Now, another thing to remember when you're drawing stems, you don't want your stem too fat and in proportion to the rose, but you also don't want it too thin to where this little flimsy stem is trying to support this big rose. So what I do is imagine like a straw. I would say about the width of a straw is what I usually do on my roses, depending on how big it's going to be. Obviously, if you're doing this big on a back or somewhere large, but for a tattoo this size, another thing that's really important with drawing is knowing how detailed to make it based on how big the tattoo is going to be. If this was going to be blown up really big, then this design would be way too plain. But if this was going to be a small gap filler, then that's perfect. So now that I got these two almost kind of, little curvy lines, what I like to do is draw the end almost where it would be cut out. Or like if you, cut a rose at an angle or flowers at an angle, be something like this. Now you can trick these out however you want. It's almost like a teardrop shape. So I'm drawing kind of like an angled teardrop shape, just like that. And we'll get into like the different ways you can trick that out later. So usually if you look at a lot of roses, both real life and traditional roses, it has small stems breaking off of the main stem, which make up the leaves. So basically, as the rose is growing, then the leaves are also coming out and growing as well. So what I usually like to do is I will start with just drawing one like this. Just kind of lightly draw. Give it a little bit of a bend. Now I see some people, they'll want to draw just a perfect hard straight line. You can totally do that. For me, I like to have it look a little bit more loose, kind of flow. So what I like to do is when I'm doing leaves is not stack it like a ladder where it's like right next to each other, right next to each other. So since this one's right here, I'll come down a little bit closer to the bottom of the rose stem and draw kind of the same shape. But this way it's not exactly like that one. You know, it looks like they're kind of blooming out in different areas. So the way I determine how many leaves I'm going to do is basically how long the stem was. You know, so if my stem was cut off, say about right there, then I'd only have room for maybe two sets of leaves. But in this situation, I have room for a couple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another one coming up right here. Again, drawing really lightly. And what this is going to be the center or the vein of the leaf. So just keep that in mind. Try to keep those somewhat the same. They don't have to be perfectly the same, but just so you have an idea. So then what I'm going to do is go ahead and draw this stem too. Now obviously this is going to have thorns, but we'll get to the small details later on. So what I'm going to do is start drawing the shape of the leaf. Now what I like to do is have the leaf bending in the direction that the vein is going. So this one dips in like that, and then this one dips over. Most of you, I'm sure, know what the shape of a leaf looks like, but the important thing is to make the direction of the outer leaf follow the vein. So there you go, something like that. Just like that. And then I'll come over here to this one, do the same thing. And I leave a gap. Some people will connect this all the way to the top. Sometimes I do that. It just depends on what kind of, you know, rose I'm doing or what mood I'm in. So go ahead and come over here. Draw this like this. And again, the sizes don't have to be perfect matching, but it is good to make sure that they're very similar, just so that way it's cohesive. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw these last two leaves like this. And say if this was, you know, going on a part of the body, or you were just wanting to draw it smaller, you could always have this cut off about right here to where you lose those two leaves. But because my stem is so long is why I'm giving it 4 leaves. So I'm coming over here, draw this leaf. So in a lot of the Sailor Jerry Flash, most of the leaves on the entire rose design are all the same leaves. For me, I do like to add a mixture of big leaves and small leaves, just to kind of break it up. So that's the tricky part, is now you want to go around the rose and draw more leaves like this. And you want them to be relatively same in size. So using this shape, you'll go through and pick out some spots. Now what I like to do is not make it perfectly symmetrical, because a lot of times for people who draw on the iPad, if this was symmetrical, you'd have a leaf here and here. But the reality is that can look stiff. So what I do is, instead of, you know, making this symmetrical, although that would be easier, just go through and kind of sketch them where it feels right to have them at. There's no magic number. Typically you want to have an odd number of things. It's just more aesthetically pleasing. So like 1, 3, or 5. But I mean, as you can see, I have 4 down here. Ideally, some people would do, you know, just 3 leaves and then maybe a small one. But overall, I will have an odd number of leaves. So just kind of a rule of thumb in drawing overall. So I'm going to draw another one like this. And then sometimes I like to double stuff up. So if I have 2 or like, you know, a bunch of leaves like this that are all spaced out, then what I'll do is I'll come here and then do 2 leaves that are kind of touching like this. So that way it's not so perfectly spread out. So there you go. So right now I have 5 leaves, which is an odd number, which is good. But don't get so focused on the number that you're compromising the drawing. Just as you're going, take a step back, look at it, say, okay, either it needs more or it needs less. So I'm gonna go ahead and go through. This spot looks a little empty to me. And since this is over here, usually on the opposing side is you wanna balance it out. So I'm gonna do a leaf right here. And this is just a smaller leaf. And I'm gonna do one up here. Again, keeping the smaller leaves very similar in size. Okay, now I feel like it needs one more right over here, so I'm just gonna tuck it in just like that. There we go. So now that I feel like these leaves are all kind of balanced, I go through and I'm gonna add the stems and the big leaves, kind of like how you have right here. So what I'll do is draw the points like this. Again, you want to try to match the thickness of the veins with the ones down here. That way they don't look like mismatching leaves. So I'm going to go through, lightly sketch this like that. Again, these don't have to be perfect. Just make sure you're kind of eyeballing it. Make sure that the size is pretty relative to the other leaves. So now we have the stems of all of our bigger leaves. And you can add stuff to these and we'll get to that later. Okay, so now that we have that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add the individual vein lines coming off the main stem right here. So this is just a mental habit for me. You do not have to do this, but I like to count these as I go. The reason I do that is because if I'm counting them, then I can keep them somewhat similar in spacing and sizing. So what I'll do is I'll go like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you don't have to do 6. 6 is not the magic number, but do however many lines feels good to you, where the spacing is nice and even. I know some people like to have their lines a little bit tighter. I know some people that like to have them spaced out more. This is kind of the happy medium that I like. So then, yeah, then I go through on the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I know for some of you that draw, that might seem foreign to you, counting the numbers, and it might feel stiff to you. That's totally fine. I mean, in nature, things wouldn't necessarily be perfect, so have some fun with it, but I just want to show you the way I do about it, just to kind of use as a reference. So I'm literally going to go through all these. Now I leave this open because if this were a tattoo, I usually like to do this a different color than the other bigger part of the leaf. So I'm going to go through, again, trying to keep this tip about the same size on each leaf. So we'll start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Go on this side. Oh, actually, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm gonna let you guys go ahead and repeat that on these bottom two. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna extend this top one just so it goes a little bit more into that tip. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And come down to this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Back to this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe for your leaves, you're doing 5 lines, 6 lines, 7 lines, whatever is comfortable for you. Again, you want to make it your own. This is just how I do it. So I'm not going to count off the rest of these ones. I'm just going to go through and add my lines. So while I'm doing that, go ahead and start filling in the lines on the rest of your leaves. Again, lightly sketching, trying to keep the lines spacing about even. There's a million different ways you can do leaves, and we'll get into that later. Now, if you notice on these ones, there's not quite 6 lines on each side, and that's because this leaf is going now behind petals as to where these ones are fully exposed. So don't be so hard on yourself about making the exact same lines on these leaves that you would on the fully exposed leaves. So come over to these ones. I'm going to add the rest of these lines. If you notice, these ones have 5 instead of 6 because technically this leaf would keep going behind, which would make up the rest of the vein lines. So I'm just going to finish these up here. Again, a lot of times in drawing, you want to jump to the cool stuff. You want to start adding some really cool, gnarly thorns or some folds or little stuff. I always say, start with the blueprint first. Get your basic structure and outline down, and then from there, build it. It's almost like building a foundation of a house before adding all the details. You got to get the structure right and all the proportions right before you go in and add the details. So that's just something important to remember. So I'm going to go ahead, finish adding these lines on these leaves. So now, as you can see, this looks pretty much complete. Now there's multiple ways you can go about this as far as how you want the leaves. With these smaller leaves, you can add, you know, a middle line like that. You can add another little vein like this. That's really up to you. Once you have the general idea laid out, have fun with these leaves. Make them unique, make them your own. You know, some people, you know, say you have a line like this, they might want to add a little tip like that so it matches that. Whatever you want for that is totally fine. I'll show you how I would do my big leaves in this case, and then I'll let you guys kind of either do it my way or try something that seems more suitable for you. So I'm gonna go and hard line this and then go through. And then what I'm doing, if you can see, is instead of making this straight, is I'm kind of rounding these and connecting them to the center. It's good to get in a rhythm. As you continue drawing, you're going to start to get more and more loose, and you'll feel your hand flowing, and I think that's really good. But that comes with time. If you feel like your hand is really stiff at first, don't beat yourself up. I mean, that obviously comes with time. Like riding a skateboard, you're not going to jump on a skateboard and just know how to do it. So I decided to go with this little middle divider line. The reason I do that in tattooing is because then I can get this kind of two-toned. So that's just a look I really like. So I'm going to come over here. Now, while I'm doing this, go ahead and go through all of your leaves and just hard line them. Again, you don't have to do it the way I'm doing it, but this is just a way I like to do it. And again, see, this is why it's important to have those light lines so you can see kind of a guideline of where to go off of when you're making these hard lines. So I'm kind of following the old line as well as making small improvements. So if one of these light lines is not correct, I can go through with my darker line and make it correct. And sometimes you'll get your darker lines that are incorrect and you can erase and go back. So I'm going to go ahead and keep hardlining all these leaves. Get creative with these small ones. I like to do something like this. Again, because I tattoo and draw a lot of the same subject matter, I'm always changing it up. I mean, they're somewhat cohesive in look, but as far as, you know, the leaves or the colors, I try to change it up a little bit. That way it keeps the variety there, and I'm not replicating the exact same rose or exact same drawing every time. So there we go. And I'm going through and hard lining this. Let me turn this a little bit. That's another thing. If you go to Disneyland or somewhere like that, they have those spinning tables, so that way you can come from different angles. I think that's good too, because sometimes pulling a line from a certain angle is more helpful, and you'll figure that out as time goes on, and you get deeper and deeper with this. So I decided to turn this, so now I'm going to turn it this way and start pulling these lines towards me, like so. So now that we have this top part of leaves done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and just do a quick hard line of this rose. Don't feel like you have to do it as quick as I'm doing it. I've been drawing my entire life, so especially like with this tattoo stuff, some of it's kind of like second nature now. And if you do a wonky line or you mess up, just because this is your final line doesn't mean you can go back and fix it. So I do it all the time. I'll do a bad line and go back and fix it because I don't want it to look weird. So yeah, I'm going through, I'm doing this. If you need to catch up, you can always pause the video at a certain spot and just kind of catch up before you press play. Hopefully I'm not going too fast though. So yeah, as you can see, I'm just going through, pushing down hard on my pencil, just so I can make those final lines so I know what's what. So there we go, like that. So now things are getting more defined. I'm getting rid of the loose lines in the background, and now my design is becoming more apparent, just like that. Okay, so this top part, as far as the outline goes, is pretty much done, ready to go. So the only thing that's missing down here is some thorns. Thorns is another thing. I've seen them drawn multiple ways, so don't feel like you have to do it one way. I'm gonna show you how I do it. I kind of hook it up like this. And what I do is I go through all the little empty gaps. You don't want to do too many thorns, and you also don't want to do too little, but my whole thing is just making sure that they're visible and that you can see this is a rose, because if you were to go grab a rose out of a rose bush, you're going to get poked by these bad boys. So yeah, go through you know, since this one connects and I don't want the thorn connecting to the vein, I'm just gonna pop one right here. Just like that. So yeah, so what I'm gonna do is, now that I have those, go through and start making your hard lines for everything. Now you can sketch like I'm doing when you're doing your hard line. That's easier for some people. So you can sketch like this while pushing hard, or you can literally pull one hard line like that. Whatever's more comfortable for you. Again, turning the paper so I can, the reason you want to turn the paper at times is because you want to get that wrist flow going to where, you know, if you're pulling a line, you don't want to be pulling it awkwardly because then it's going to be more stiff. So that's why I recommend turning the paper. So yeah, I'm just going to go through and hard line these leaves and then hard line these thorns. Again, don't feel like you got to rush. Sometimes I draw quickly on a lot of these things, and you might feel like you have to go fast, but I think it's just good to slow down and make sure you're doing it correct. I think speed comes with time and just learning exactly what you're doing, and it gets easier and easier. So yeah, just going through hard lining all these. Now I'm going to do the same thing I did up here, kind of hard line these and add a little curve to these. Obviously rose leaves can look different ways in nature. So I see a lot of guys, they'll do pointed right here. That looks a little bit more like an actual rose leaf. But that's the fun thing with traditional, is you can kind of tweak little things, make it your own. And then, you know, for me, over time, I have signature ways I like to do stuff. And that's kind of fun because, you know, when people see your artwork, they can recognize, oh, that's how so-and-so does it. You know, you kind of adapt to these little things, but that's obviously not important when you're first learning how to draw. I think the important thing when you're first learning how to draw something is, you know, having a formula. If you don't have a formula when you're drawing, and by formula I mean using lines and shapes and kind of creating a blueprint for the drawing before you build, then I think you're making your job harder on yourself. Just like a house, you don't just start building a house. You have to have, you know, a blueprint and kind of a map or a guideline of where things need to be at. And it's the exact same way with drawing. So, all right, so I'm almost getting to the end of this last leaf. And a thing with tattooing or drawing traditional stuff is knowing if it's too plain or if you've added too much. That's really up to the discretion of you. For me, I like to step back, look at it, say, hey, does it really need something? So for this, you can kind of trick this out however you want. There's millions of different ways you can do it. So what I'm going to do is kind of a more exaggerated teardrop, kind of bring it this way. And the reason I'm bringing it this way is because it goes and then pulls that way. So just like that. Now, some people add a little bump right here. If you want to add a little detail, whatever you want to do, make it your own. That's totally cool. Now for me, I feel like some of these little open gaps are a little too plain. If this tattoo or design was shrunk down really small, then obviously less is more. But if I was to tattoo this at this size, this looks a little plain to me. So what I'm going to do is just add some of these little shooters coming out. Just like that. And you'll see some of my roses on my page have this and some don't. It really just depends on if I feel the design needs it, or if I've been doing these a lot lately, it might not need it. So there you guys go. This is just a general rough layout of a rose with a stem. I hope you guys liked the video. I hope this helped you guys out. And stay tuned for some more videos, and feel free to message me if you guys have any questions. Thanks a lot.